This episode of the Modern Therapist Survival Guide is brought to you by Zynnyme.
Do you ever wish there was someone who could really tell you what the right path is for you in private practice so you could avoid wasting time and get to what you love? Helping clients? Kelly and Miranda of Zynnyme are two therapists who do just that. They don't get you cookie-cutter solutions that work for some people. Instead, they teach you a process that works for everybody.
Be sure to stick around for the end of the episode to get free access to over 10 hours of free private practice trainings, including their Marketing Masterclass COVID Edition.
This podcast is also sponsored by Hushmail.
Hushmail and Hush Secure Forms take the guesswork out of secure communications by providing encrypted email, web forms, and e-signatures all in one package. During a time when limiting contact is necessary to protect our clients' health, using secure email and web forms to communicate is more important than ever. Now is the perfect time to move your paper forms and PDFs to HIPAA-compliant digital forms that your clients can easily fill out. You can send them through secure email or put them on your website.
Hushmail has a special offer for all listeners of the Modern Therapist Survival Guide, so be sure to stay tuned until the end of the episode and find out how you can start using Hushmail today.
You're listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide, where therapists live, breathe, and practice as human beings. To support you as a whole person and a therapist, here are your hosts, Curt Widhalm and Katie Vernoy.
Welcome back, Modern Therapists. This is the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. I'm Curt Widhalm with Katie Vernoy, and this is one of our other episodes where we are being joined by one of our fabulous Therapy Reimagined 2020 virtual conference speakers.
Woo!
Today we are joined by Dr. Sonya Lott, and she's going to be speaking at our conference about cultivating cultural humility through self-compassion. And over the last several months, the discussions around race and racial dynamics, and even the discussions we've had here on the podcast, have weighed very heavily on a lot of people. And being able to talk about the dynamics with that sense of self-compassion is something that I'm really looking forward to. And today we are talking about the multicultural approach to therapy, because cramming everybody into single little boxes just doesn't seem to be working anymore. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of your wisdom with us.
Thank you. It's my joy to be here.
So Sonya, you and I have started getting to know each other, and I am so excited you're here with us, and I just so value our new friendship.
Yes.
The first question we ask everyone is, who are you and what are you putting out into the world?
Oh, I am Sonya Lott, and I am a 60-year-old African-American, cisgender, bisexual woman who's fairly able-bodied and pretty spiritual. And what I'm putting out in the world is a message around the importance of us all doing our own work and being the most authentic that we possibly can, and particularly as therapists here to do our own healing first and then heal others as best as we are able to.
So we're going to jump right into this. We start a lot of our episodes as a learning point to help people from making the same mistakes that other therapists have been making. So what do you find that a lot of therapists get wrong about approaching therapy from a multicultural approach?
I think one of the most common things that therapists get wrong is that a multicultural approach has only to do with race and or ethnicity, that they don't appreciate that it has to do with all of the cultural identities that we all have, whether we name them or not. Race might be more salient for one 60-year-old Black woman and not for another. Mm-hmm. The woman might be more salient and she may be more connected to that. Age might be a more important factor. So I think that's one thing that many therapists get wrong, that we're just talking about race and or ethnicity. And another thing that I think therapists get wrong about a multicultural approach is that we think it has to do more with them, not us. Particularly if we're sitting in dominance around and privilege around a particular identity. For example, as a cisgender woman, if I were thinking that understanding that the whole issue around being trans is what I need to know about them, then that's a problem. I need to be aware of the privileges that I'm sitting in and how I've been socialized to believe that gender, for example, is a binary concept that is consistent with whatever your genitalia is.
Yeah.
And then if I can just add one more thing to that, I think that we assume that our lived experiences make us multiculturally competent, if you will. We know everything we need to know. My best friends are non-binary, or, my husband is from Iran, or my mom's bisexual, or I've worked with Black people before. And it's so much more than our lived experience. We have 50 years of scholarly work in this field called multicultural psychology to help us to see beyond our lived experiences.
For our listeners who are wanting to broaden out the approach from kind of a cultural competence lens, or even, kind of doing some of these things where it's lived experience, or it's, what I know, or those kinds of things, or sitting in privilege or dominance in the room. Let's step back to the bigger picture of kind of what a multicultural orientation is, because I think that's so logical. You sent us an article, and we'll put that in the show notes for our listeners, that really digs deeply into this. But in reading it, it made so much sense to me, but I think it's not necessarily how it's frequently talked about. So maybe you can start with kind of what is a multicultural orientation?
It's a way of being, which is a theme at this year's Therapy Reimagine conference.
Yes, it is.
That it's a way of the therapist thinking about themselves and all of the people that they're working with, and really about the world, all of us in the world. So I think of it as like the umbrella that we carry along the journey of, quote, multicultural competence. The multicultural orientation has like three components, of which cultural humility is a foundation. And I'll come back to what that means in just a second. Mm-hmm. But it also includes the comfort in, it includes recognizing cultural opportunities, if you will.
Yes.
When it's important to, if a client brings something to you, and Curt and Katie, you all talked about this in the Ally is Verb podcast. Like if a client brings something to you, having the cultural comfort, which is the third component, to be able to say, well, I really hear you on that. I understand that. But is that something you want to talk with me about? Giving clients the invitation and being comfortable with it. Or if something comes up, you misstep, for example. Of course, all microaggressions are unintended, but one slips out and the client reacts to that we can have the comfort in staying present with the client and repairing that, hearing how they received it and being able to work at trying to repair that. So that's what a multicultural orientation is. It's a way of being, and you can't be that with your clients if you're not that all the time. It's not something that we can turn on and off. So it's sort of the way of being that allows you to be open to the whole set of multicultural competencies, if you will, that our mental health professional organizations offer us.
You brought up the idea around cultural humility, which I think is something that unfortunately has been way too recent as far as a discussion of how therapists should be. That, even as, when I was in grad school, looking at around 15 years ago now, this idea wasn't really even being pushed yet. So this is something that seems kind of obvious once you actually talk about what it means. Yeah. And I think that the shift has gone from this idea of being culturally competent, needing to know everything about each culture that comes into your office and still sitting in that expert position as the therapist, to being comfortable, as I understand it, of cultural humility, of being comfortable with not knowing and about allowing for a client's stories to unfold. Am I understanding this correctly?
That's true. And thank you, Curt, for that question, because I said I was going to explain what comfortability was and just went on to, just totally blanked on that. So yeah, the cultural humility itself, the organizing virtue, as it's referred to in the article, is a two-part. It's an intrapersonal and an interpersonal component. And the intrapersonal piece, the within part, is being aware of who you are and what your limitations are, and where you sit with privilege and where you sit with marginalization, and what you're doing, way of being, what you're doing about that. you know? So that's the first part. And the other part is being other oriented, putting the needs of the people, in this case, the client that you're sitting with, in front of yours. It requires letting go, being aware of power you have, no matter what your cultural identities are, because we sit in the other chair or the couch. We have power that our clients who come to us for healing don't have. So it's relinquishing that sense of power that we have as therapists, and then also with whatever cultural identities that we have. Whether or not they're salient to us, we need to be aware that the way that our clients see us is equally as important, if not more important, than how we see ourselves. So that's the piece that gets challenging for us as therapists, because we're trained that we have the answers, that we lead the way, if you will, that we're the experts, and so it's difficult sometimes with our clients to relinquish or to share that. It's really a power sharing.
I love that because it's so collaborative. And for me, it feels more organic, because when I was trained like Curt, but longer ago, it was definitely cultural competence. It was, you need to know and don't let them see you sweat. Like it's one of those things where there was a lack of authenticity there, and a kind of what Curt nodded to at the very beginning, kind of this putting people into boxes. And so if I'm working with you, Sonya, like you said, maybe I'm studying what it means to be an African American. Maybe I'm studying what it means to be 60. It's not, let me look at all the intersection of everything that makes you you, and also not looking at the uniqueness that is you. And to me, being able to be humble in that and just saying, who are you and how do you move through the world? What are your values? What can I find from you? Like being able to actually just explore you versus having to know everything. Like I need to have an awareness,
That's right.
but being able to be present with you in a place of humility is really interesting. And I think the things that really struck me in the article you sent to us was this idea of the opposite is kind of getting into that egotistical or kind of an ego-driven stance or a defensive stance where I have to be the expert on you, or I have to, if there is something about me that's coming up, I have to deny it, or those kinds of things. Like instead, just being very present in the room to the experience and being a person focused on my client, but also being aware what I bring to the room. It makes so much sense.
And I like how you said, who are you? Actually, that's for my two upcoming live webinars. One focusing on our own racial and cultural identity. The photograph that I chose to accompany the posting is just that, who are you?
Yeah.
And so it's equally important to want to know who our clients are as individuals, but we can't do that if we can't really receive that unless we're doing the who are you for ourselves all the time. Who are we in this moment? Who are we becoming? Because we're a work in progress all the time, whether we are aware of it or not. So that who are you is such an important question. And I feel like every experience is a multicultural experience, because if you take all the identities that we have, the ones that we claim or that, again, are salient to us, and what other people are seeing in us, like it's common for white people not to think about being white. But I know you too know this, but you better believe people of color are seeing you as white. You know. And so even if it's not an identity that's salient to you, other people are seeing it, but you need to know who you are, to yourself, for the ones that are salient to you, as well as how other people are perceiving you. So when you're doing that work in the moment, who you are and who you're becoming, it's an ongoing thing. And it's the same thing with our clients. When we put together all of our experiences of privilege and marginalization and the meaning that we each give it uniquely, even if there was somebody on this podcast with us who identified exactly in the way that I did at the beginning, it would still be a multicultural exchange.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that who are you for all of us is so important all the time.
That just sounds like a lot of work to keep doing that all the time. Because this is, and I say that jokingly, is this seems to come up in a number of the episodes that we've had over the last couple of months. I'll give credit to Dr. Gerald Chow, who talks about the clinicians who just kind of want to reach a certain point in their career and then just kind of coast. But you're saying that this is an ongoing process. I have to imagine that this is only one of the obstacles that clinicians have in developing a multicultural orientation. Is just like, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. I want to say I have a practice of listening when I'm invited to be a guest in a podcast. I listen to episodes of the podcast and, particularly the ones that are relevant to what I'm talking about, but also to get to know the host or host. And in this case, that was so valuable because, Curt, I know exactly where you are in your openness and your commitment to a multicultural orientation. But I also know now your humor from having listened. So I can stay open. I was able to stay open.
She's basically saying you're rude, but I understand where you're coming from.
No. Your rudeness has a point because I know you.
I get you. No, yeah. It's not
okay.
rude at all,
I'll accept that. Yeah.
But you know what? That's so true. That's what people say, that it's too much work. And I just sent an article to a very good friend of mine who, after 31 years of sisterhood, she's a white female who lives up what I used to call Wisconsin and they call Wisconsin. And we're just starting really after 31 years of sisterhood to have these really deep, hard conversations together, and which we're both really grateful for. But she's reading White Fragility with a group of people. And she asked if I would send her a copy of an article that I mentioned to her. And it's about white fatigue. And in the study, they're making the researchers are making a distinction between white fragility. It's just too hard. And white fatigue, the people who are staying in and doing the work, the fatigue that comes with that. And for people of color, for example, or people with any marginalized identity, there's fatigue all the time. And one trying to push back the trauma of daily living based on the microaggressions that happen, particularly based on color and our gender, because those are things that you can't really hide, right?
Sure.
Not that people are wanting to hide, but when you walk in the room, you're announcing, I'm still brown today. I'm still a woman, And so we're busy trying to fend all that off, and that takes a lot of energy. And then we don't want to have to do any more work. We want to, those of us with marginalized experience, oftentimes, we want to just lean into, I'm living this. Do I have to do more too? This is traumatizing and fatiguing. But it's in our best interest to recognize, to lean into the places where we have marginalization, learn more about how we can dismantle the systems that perpetuate that marginalization, and also find the power in understanding other people who too are marginalized, and how we can show up as allies in the ways still where we have privilege. There are very few people who sit totally in privilege or totally in marginalization.
Sure.
There's usually one area where we have, that gives us both. So it is a lot of work. And so when you do have privilege in whatever area, your privilege comes with an opt-out card.
Yes.
And you get to opt out of the process anytime it gets too hard. And that's part of the challenge in getting people to see the value in doing this work. Because I always say that there's an inside joke here. And it's that you're not doing this work for them. You're doing this work for you. Yeah. Because you get to transform yourself, and you get to live from a more authentic place.
The idea of white fatigue and just kind of fatigue in general, that really resonates with me. I'd love to have that article, and maybe we can also share that in the show notes. But this idea that when you're doing the work and you're feeling that fatigue, that is part of the process, because it is exhausting to be aware, to be doing the work. And I think the fatigue that marginalized communities are feeling is they can't opt out of it. Right. So I think that there's that idea of the fatigue and the potential desire to opt out, the recognition about the opt out, and then also where we can't opt out of marginalization. I think with that, and this is just a short side note, but with that, it seems like when we recognize that this is fatigue, that we then show compassion for ourselves, that we are able to provide ourselves with some resources and resilience by actually maybe not opting out, but sitting in quiet, kind of, because a lot of these things happen in relationship, right? So if we can take some moments to ourselves, it seems like that would be a way that we could potentially move into that space of rejuvenating, regenerating our resources, that kind of stuff. And so to me, being able to identify a real pathway toward fully doing this work and having a multicultural orientation requires more than just who am I and how does my client perceive me and how do I perceive myself? Who is my client? How do I ask those questions? It seems like there's also potentially a self-care component that is required.
And also it's more than what's a good book to read.
Yes.
And I promise I'll come back to the self-care piece, because that's what my presentation at the Therapy Reimagine conference is about, self-compassion. It's, a form of self-care with cultural humility. But I just wanted to say that so many people now are saying, well, I don't know what to do. Can you tell me a good book to read? This is a felt process. It's an experiential one. And there are no easy answers. There's no quick fix. And you can't it's like we tell our clients about anything they come to us with. We can't heal what we don't feel, So this is a messy, long-term, fatiguing process for all of us when we begin to see with new eyes. And it is more than just who am I and who are you. It's so much more than that, The whole thing of cultural humility requires us to see ourselves as human and to sit with that. And what does it mean to not have all the answers? I have a PhD. I don't know about you. And to sit with the truth that we can't, it's not even possible to know everything about anything, And those of us who are mental health professionals, and we know a lot about mental health, but while we were busy getting our graduate degrees, the rest of the world was on learning something else, So we all have strengths and weaknesses, and it's a truth. But still, because we're talking about our sense of self, our ego, that all these identities have to do with our sense of self, it's hard work to look at the fragility that exists within us as human beings, the imperfection that in our perfection, if you will. So that's the hardest part. That cultural humility. And that's why it's so critical to having a multicultural orientation and opening up to trying to take in as much of the learning as you can around the systems and how they perpetuate marginalization and offer privilege, and understanding ways that we can advocate and all of that, So there is a really large self-component part to doing this work, to transforming ourselves again, as I like to talk about it.
There's such a vulnerability in that, because I think there's a requirement to have knowledge, but also sitting in the place of not knowing, of being imperfect. I think, at least for me, it's really tough. Like, I want to know, I want to avoid messy interactions, and you just can't in this. And so it's being so present to my experience and recognizing that what my felt experience is may be irrelevant, and most likely is irrelevant to my client. Recognizing that even though I may have self-esteem concerns that day, or feeling very marginalized in whatever way based on my own identities, that I still sit very much in a position of power, and that may be impacting my client while I'm still feeling very low. And so it's really having to take this broad view and continue to reassess and be present, but also observing and making sure that I'm recognizing what's actually in the room, not just what I'm feeling.
That's right. But as it relates to self-care, if I can just talk about that for a few minutes. The whole idea of self-compassion, and this is a Kristen Ness version of self-compassion, which I really appreciate. I think it's essential to staying in this journey. And so she talks about self-compassion as having three components. We like, numbers, three components for multicultural orientation, three components for self-compassion. But it involves shared humanity, mindfulness, and I'll come back to these, and loving kindness. So, Curt, I heard you. I remember and Katie in the ally is a verb talking about the therapist neglecting, just saying, go meditate. But I want to say that mindfulness, in the way that I'm going to define it, is crucial to this. That practice is crucial to this work of cultivating cultural humility. And it is being present to whatever you're feeling when you're feeling it without judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Or if there is judgment, you're not judging yourself about just having judged yourself.
Oh, I'm really good at that. I judge myself for judging myself, and then I judge myself for judging myself for judging myself. And it's just this endless loop of judgment. It's horrible.
Right. So it's a practice, okay? It's a practice of trying to allow our feelings to come and go, no matter how bizarre or how painful they may be. And I want to emphasize it is a practice over time.
Mm-hmm.
So that helps us to sit with our, I should have said it this way, or I wonder if the client's thinking that I meant this when I meant that, and I can never get it right kind of thing. So it's a practice over time that we're caring for ourselves and recognizing one of the other components is shared humanity. Everybody messes up. This whole thing is messy work. Okay, it's not about getting it right. It's about staying on the path of trying to understand what we need to understand to heal, repair, whatever, as it comes up on the journey, And the other thing is the loving kindness. And I know some people, outside of, these spiritual bubbles that we can find ourselves in, myself included on occasion, that, that's so, so icky,
woo-woo.
Sweet, woo-woo, thank you, woo-woo, too woo-woo. But it's about offering to yourself what you would offer to somebody else. If one of your colleagues came in and said, oh my God, I think I just really messed up. The client is an Asian immigrant, a female, and I said something, whatever. We would likely say, oh, wow, God, I can understand how you feel really bad about that. But, we all mess up. Can we talk about what you can do to try to repair that? Let's take some deep breaths together. It's the same thing that we need to offer to ourselves. The acceptance, the loving kindness, the unconditional regard that we give to other people and hope people are giving to us. And so that's a practice, that we have to commit to over time. So some people feel like that self-care is exhausting too. It's too much. I can't do it. But again, it's not just for your clients. It's not just to make a living. It's to transform your way of being, period, that benefits you and everybody who you're in relationship with.
I do want to go to one of the questions that we sent you that kind of shifts the subject back here a little bit. And before we were recording today, Sonya had asked me, what does this question mean? And so the question that I had sent over to her is, how do the structures of the therapy profession really inhibit this multicultural approach? And Sonya's like, what does this mean? And I go, well, why is therapy still so white? Like, what is the structures of our profession that stops us from having these conversations, that stops us from going through our own racial identities and being able to create the space for these conversations and then create the space for ourselves? Why can't the profession get this right?
Because they don't have to.
Mic drop.
Boom. That's it. They don't have to. I'm really struck by the number of therapists that I talk to who say, well, I don't know, what to do, or I don't know, what I need to learn. Is there a book that I can read? And we have 50 years of theory and peer-reviewed journal knowledge available to us, on every aspect of anything related to any cultural component. And so that's been there for over 50 years. But there's a twofold piece in that. Like the mental health organizations now have, since 2002, almost 20 years, have allowed these documents to be put on websites saying, okay, here's what you're supposed to do. Because the communities, primarily people of color, not limited to, but primarily people of color, have created this quote movement, the multicultural psychology movement from the early 70s, and brought it to where it is. So in saying this is important, we need to do this, the dominant group, right, people said, okay, we'll say that this is what you have to do and we'll incorporate it into the ethical standards, but all right. And so nothing happens. It's, from my point of view, it's the not seeing it as important, particularly as it relates to race and ethnicity, that it's really not that big a deal, but we'll let you all say that it is. So there's not the priority, particularly around race and ethnicity, and the sense that that's really what it's all about. White therapists and educators are not trained. They haven't done their own work, so they can't really lead these discussions around, to be present to all that comes up when we're talking about all of these different identities. More than 50% of therapists still report that they know very little about what it means to be anything other than cisgender. The binary about, the either or, male or female, and that's all there is, and all of that. So there's a lack of knowledge and a lack of an awareness of needing to, or really just being too tired, not wanting to do the work. I'm not getting paid to do this, So that's a piece. And the other piece is, again, that these are people of color who have led this charge, if you will. More recently, there are more people, white people, who have come into the fold and are doing a lot of the research and making significant contributions as well. But it's about the perspective that, is this really necessary? It's still that sense of us versus them, that we just learn some stereotypes about them and just keep it moving. We don't have to do our own work. There's no work for us to do. So that's why, people who do research, people of color who do research in multicultural anything, are less likely to be promoted. It's tenured. It's seen as being less valuable academically. Much like in the workplace, if you do diversity work, you're more likely, people of color and women across, racial identities are seen as they're seen as less competent. So, but I said all that, but I could have just said, because I don't have to, because that's really the truth. That really is the truth.
Oh, that frustrates me so much.
I'm going to buy your book. Would you write it called Because They Don't Have To?
You know what? Yeah, and I'm going to have to thank you. I'm going to have to give you proceeds for that, because you gave me the title. But, that's why I created my company, SimPsych, Continuing Education of Multicultural Psychology. We have a whole set of guidelines from the APA about what we're supposed to do in our continuing ed training, and nobody does it. So that's why I created my company, and it's exclusive to just that.
Where can people find that company online?
Oh, my. It's thanks for asking, Curt. It's simpsych.com, CEMPSYCH.com. And I have 2 live webinars coming up that I just posted. And I want to offer your listeners a discount if they would like to sign up for those that are currently available and any upcoming ones, to get a 10% discount off of any, either the webinars or anything upcoming in the next few months. The coupon code is 10, the number 10, TEN, MTSG, for Modern Therapist Survival Guide, 10, the word TEN, MTSG, for 10% discount.
And we will include the links to Sonya's website and also the discount code in our show notes. You can find those at our website, mtsgpodcast.com. And we mentioned that Dr. Lott will be joining us over at the Therapy Reimagine 2020 virtual conference. That's coming up September 25th, 26th.
Yay! Yes.
And we are super excited with all of the conference speakers that we're bringing out. Well, I guess we're not bringing them out, that we're bringing to your home or your phone or wherever you're going to be able to watch. Yes. And until next time, I'm Curt Widhalm with Katie Vernoy and Dr. Sonya Lott.
Thanks again to our sponsor, Kelly and Miranda of Zynnyme.
Kelly and Miranda of Zynnyme have been helping therapists from across the country and around the world grow, revamp, and launch profitable private practices that really help people, while also making sure therapists' lives stay in balance. Their award-winning and multiple times sell-out business school boot camp for therapists is the largest private practice resource on the planet and will transform your life and business, whether you are 20-plus years in or you're just starting out from scratch.
They have the largest collection of free private practice resources for therapists. Go to zynnyme.com today and sign up for their free marketing masterclass and get access to 10-plus hours of free training and a free community for therapists that is not on Facebook.
Also, thanks to our sponsor, Hushmail.
Hush Secure Forms makes emailing securely with your clients and using HIPAA-compliant web forms very easy. You can start with one of their web form templates and customize it to reflect your practice. Or use their drag-and-drop form builder to build beautiful forms from scratch. No need for extra services to get your forms signed. Hushmail provides email, web forms, and e-signatures that work seamlessly together in one package to get the job done. Great for contact forms, health histories, client experience surveys, referrals, and screenings. Among other popular forms, Hushmail's template directory includes a COVID-19 screening questionnaire and several screening forms, such as the PHQ-9 depression screening and the GAD-7 anxiety screening, which calculate a score upon completion.
And as a Modern Therapist Survival Guide listener, you get a 10% lifetime discount. Just go to hushmail.com/therapy reimagined and sign up for the Hushmail for Healthcare plan that suits your practice. Hushmail has a plan for everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. Learn more about who we are and what we do at mtsgpodcast.com. You can also join us on Facebook and Twitter. And please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our episodes.